So I've recently discovered through my videos that healthcare is one of the #1 reasons people don't want to leave Australia and are not wanting to go and live overseas in a place like here in Penang. Now, there is some validity to this. Australia has fantastic healthcare, but I also think there's an element of healthcare not being understood in Southeast Asia. I see a lot of the comments I get are around, oh, you're going to regret it. As soon as you get sick, you're going to want to come back, etc., etc. And I think that's just a little bit of ignorance when it comes to what healthcare is like in Southeast Asia. I think a lot of the impression that Australians have of healthcare over here in Southeast Asia is based around this idea that it's like third world, it's developing, hospitals are dirty and things like that. And in this video, I'm going to just share our personal experience of what the healthcare system has been like in Southeast Asia when compared to Australia. So for those that don't know who we are a family that decided to check out of Australia, give up in Australia in a way, and start traveling around Southeast Asia. We've decided to make Penang in Malaysia our home. And we've had to use the healthcare system several times. Now, what I'm going to talk about is based on our experience with the healthcare system in Malaysia, but also in Vietnam and in Thailand. I'm sure in other places in Southeast Asia, the experience may be different. The first thing I'd like to say is that the healthcare system in Southeast Asia is nowhere near as bad as it's made out to be in, say, the comments of these videos. I feel like I said, a lot of that comes from an ignorance, maybe having not experienced it firsthand and just having this preconceived idea of what it's about. Our experience of the healthcare system in Southeast Asia has actually been really good. And I think the common myth is that the hospitals and the doctors and the nurses over here are not skilled at what they do. You've got to remember in Southeast Asia, a lot of doctors are actually trained in Australia. You know, for instance, we're here in Malaysia. Malaysia actually has a Monash University in Kuala Lumpur, and it trains a lot of doctors to an Australian standard. Not only that, a lot of Malaysian students, a lot of students from Southeast Asia come to Australia to learn to be doctors because they know that the quality of education in Australia is absolutely amazing. Then they come home and they become doctors in their home countries. So that's the first myth I want to bust, is that, you know, the doctors here are second rate. That's just simply not true. Most of the doctors here in Southeast Asia are actually very, very good and very skilled individuals. And I think the best way to go about this is just to talk about the different areas of healthcare. But before we do, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to learn more about how we go about living the life that we do overseas as a family, traveling around Southeast Asia. So the first area of healthcare is emergency healthcare. This gets brought up a lot as a concern for people who may want to relocate to Southeast Asia, is that, what if I get seriously injured? So while we don't have first-hand experience being seriously injured in Southeast Asia, I would go out on a limb and say that I think that if I was to get seriously injured, I would love to be in an Australian hospital, but simultaneously would not want to be in an Australian hospital and much rather be in one of these hospitals here. For the simple reason of there is a lot less chance of dying on a ramp here in Southeast Asia than there is in Australia. I don't think anyone can disagree that the healthcare system in Australia is stretched. It is stretched to its capacity. There's a lack of doctors and a lack of nurses. The doctors and nurses themselves are amazing and highly trained, and the people you want to be treating you. But when there's no beds to be treating you, unfortunately, the emergency healthcare system in Australia is just grossly over capacity. And there's no solution to that. It doesn't matter how many hospitals you make, there's a critical lack of doctors and nurses to fill those hospitals. Now, in Southeast Asia, are you going to get the same quality of care that you would in an Australian hospital? Well, it really depends on the hospital you go to. That is the big difference between Southeast Asia and Australia. So in Australia, if you go to hospital, the standard of care you get at a hospital doesn't really change. Doesn't matter if you go to a private hospital or a public hospital, there's really highly skilled people and there's minimum standards for those hospitals. Now, that is the one thing about Southeast Asia when it comes to the hospital system here, is that you have hospitals that are really good and you have hospitals that are really bad. And the hospitals that are really good cost money, and the hospitals that are really bad are underfunded. So if you end up in what's called a foreigner hospital or a private hospital, you got to be treated as good, if not better, than you would be in Australia, just because it's for profit. And that's why it's so important to have travel insurance when you travel overseas, or expat insurance if you live overseas. Because I know if I was to get injured in, say, a car accident here, they would take me to Gleneagles Hospital, which is like one of the top 200 hospitals in the world, and it would cost a fortune, but I wouldn't have to pay for it. Whereas if you didn't have insurance, and you see this a lot with people that go to Bali and have accidents on motorbikes or be drinking and their insurance doesn't cover them, they're up for hundreds of thousands of dollars because they get taken to one of those hospitals we're talking about, those really high quality foreigner hospitals who charge $4,000 a night for a room. So if you have insurance, it's fine. If you don't have insurance, it can get very, very expensive very quickly when it comes to emergency medical care. So I would say that the facilities and the equipment in these foreigner hospitals is of world-class standard. You know, just in Malaysia alone, 7 of the world's top 250 hospitals are located in Malaysia. So there's no issue in regards to like top of the range equipment, sophisticated equipment, top tier doctors, top tier nurses. And we've had one experience where we've had to go to one of these foreigner hospitals for Liam when he injured his chin. And we went to the ward. There, no word of a lie, would have been 12 doctors on the ward and probably 15 to 20, maybe 30 nurses for like 6 people. So I would argue over here, a lot of the hospitals, especially these private foreigner hospitals, which are sort of designed for foreigners, they're overstaffed, but that's just because they are so expensive. And the way you get around that is obviously by having good insurance. So for us, we have insurance with Southern Cross Travel Insurance, and it costs us about $3,500 a year for that insurance. But that covers pretty much everything that could possibly happen to us, especially repatriation to Australia. Because at the end of the day, we are still Australian citizens. If we need care back in Australia, this insurance makes sure that we can get back to there if we need to, or we can get treated here if we need to. So that covers emergency healthcare, which I think is most people's concerns. Now let's talk a little bit about general health and general well-being over here. Doctors' checkups, medication, and things like dentistry and things like that. That is where we've had the most exposure to healthcare here in Southeast Asia. So this is where we've had the most exposure and the most experience with the healthcare system here in Southeast Asian countries. Like I said, most of that is with Malaysian and Vietnamese healthcare systems, but it's pretty similar across the board. There may be some areas where the healthcare isn't as good. Now, I want to qualify, we're not talking about chronic healthcare here. I know some of you that watch this have chronic healthcare issues. I can't speak to that. This is more just general wear and tear on the body kind of stuff. So let's talk about a doctor's appointment here. So I mentioned that we went to a hospital for Liam's chin. He actually got a decent cut on the bottom of his chin, hitting a water slide at a water park. So we went to the hospital. The hospital really wanted to charge us an arm and a leg to have him overnight and get a plastic surgeon to fix it. And we were like, no, he doesn't need that. So we went to see a doctor's clinic, literally just a doctor's clinic around the corner. We went and seen the doctor. He was able to get us in and glue his chin back together for $20 Australian. So that's the general cost of visiting a doctor here in Southeast Asia. Anywhere between sort of $10 and $30 is what you'd expect to pay for just a general doctor's visit. Now for specialist appointments, I had to go and see an endocrinologist here in Malaysia. I had to go see an endocrinologist because I'm on testosterone replacement therapy. I just wanted to get a checkup with a specialist. So to visit an endocrinologist here, literally a walk-in appointment with an endocrinologist at a hospital cost $80 Australian. And that was an appointment that was an hour and a half. Now, I don't know what it would cost to just walk in and see a specialist in Australia, but that's what it costs over here. Now, let's use another example of the healthcare over here. My wife, Pauline, she fell off a scooter. Now, it wasn't a massive accident. Basically, someone clipped her handlebars and she fell sideways and she got quite a nasty cut on her leg. This was in Vietnam, so we went to one of these foreigner hospitals, walked in, Pauline got a ticket. They looked at her, they analyzed it. She got 2 x-rays and an ultrasound. And we were in and out in an hour and a half with our antibiotics, and it cost less than $100 to do that. And that was at a hospital and emergency department. That's in Vietnam, of course, so obviously experiences may vary depending on where you go in Southeast Asia. But that whole process was very quick, very efficient, in and out, got what we needed and moved on. The antibiotics themselves were about $4, and Pauline was on the way and on the mend. I just want to quickly interrupt here and mention that if you want to learn how we can afford to travel like we do, I've got a video just here on exactly how we go about it. So if you want, you can go and check that out and learn how we earn an income fully remotely that allows us to live in other countries like this. Let's get back to the video. So quickly on medications, the over-the-counter medications here in Southeast Asia are so cheap. As a reference point for over-the-counter medication, a box of Panadol here, which we literally just bought the other day, is $2.50 Australian. If you just want to buy it per like a blister pack, you're talking 30, 40, 50 cents for a pack of Panadol paracetamol. And that goes for pretty much all the over-the-counter medications are really quite cheap. When it comes to prescription medications, it really just depends on what you're getting. Now, we're reasonably healthy people, so the only chronic medication I have to get is testosterone. Testosterone over here is about $100, and which is basically what it costs in Australia. So that's not really any different. $100 per month is what it costs basically in Australia. Okay, so let's talk about some more miscellaneous things, some situations we've been in when it comes to medical and dental as well. So a pair of glasses. Pauline's parents came over to Vietnam while we were over there and needed a pair of glasses. So Pauline's mum basically walked in, got her eyes checked, and walked out with 3 pairs of glasses for less than $50. That includes the lens, and it was done within probably 45 minutes. So that's a pretty accurate representation. There's optometrists everywhere in Southeast Asia, and eye care is actually really quite cheap here. All right, let's talk about dental work. So again, in Vietnam, I went in for a checkup because I had some plaque on the bottom of my teeth. I got a checkup done and realized I needed 2 fillings, and I needed obviously a clean to get the plaque off. So to get 2 fillings and a clean on my teeth was $20 Australian in Vietnam, which is about what it costs here in Malaysia as well to get done. So I was in and out. I got it done the same day I went in for the checkup. I got it done. They were ready to roll, and in and out in less than sort of 40 minutes to an hour. And we've just found in general, dental over here is extremely cost effective. So Liam, our oldest boy, actually broke his 2 teeth when we were in Australia, and he got fillings put in because he can't get them crowned at the moment because he's too young. They don't know if they're going to die. So when we went in to get a pre-orthodontic check for Liam to basically straighten his teeth, we mentioned that in Australia we got these fillings done and they cost us out of pocket $1,000. And the dentist was blown away. This is a dentist in Kuala Lumpur. She was blown away because she said to us that we could have got both those teeth crowned for the cost of one of those teeth. So that implies that the crowns for 2 front teeth would have been about $500 Australian. So that just gives you an example of the difference in cost and price. So there are a couple of examples of where we've had to use medical services here in Southeast Asia. What I will say is that it's not just about the cost. Obviously, it's going to be cheaper here in Southeast Asia. I think that's pretty well known. I think it's just the misconception about the quality of care. I have just found over here, there is a level of care and attention that we just didn't get in Australia, just because the system over in Australia is just so under the pump and so overworked. The amount of care and attention the dentist gave our son when she was looking at his teeth, we haven't experienced anywhere in Australia. And this isn't disparaging Australia in any way. It's just a product of the healthcare system in Australia. It's grossly understaffed. And there's just too many people needing it. And we just don't have enough hospitals and enough doctors and enough nurses for everyone to go around. Whereas here in Southeast Asia, it's almost the opposite. There's almost too many doctors, too many dentists, too many optometrists. And because of that, the free market plays a big part in the pricing of what you get. So I'll end on saying that if you're hesitant to move to Southeast Asia because of your medical history and medical concerns, do some research, do some diligence, work out what it's going to cost you, talk to some insurance companies, see what they'll cover you for, see what they won't cover you for. And just be aware that like your general medical stuff, your day-to-day medical things that pop up are going to be cheaper in Southeast Asia. And your big ticket stuff that would be way more expensive than what it is in Australia is covered by insurance. And you need to make sure you have really, really good insurance. Like I said, we have insurance with Southern Cross Travel Insurance, and that has given us the peace of mind knowing that if we do get seriously injured and we do need to go back to Australia, or we need to end up in one of these foreigner hospitals that are really expensive, we're only going to be out of pocket the same we would have been in Australia with private health insurance. So guys, that's our experience with healthcare. Love to know your thoughts and comments. Do you disagree? Have you had any experiences with healthcare in Southeast Asia that may differ to ours? I'd love to see it in the comments. And of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to keep learning more. And let us know in the comments what else you'd like to know about our life over here in Southeast Asia. And if you haven't yet, make sure to check out this video over here on how we derive an income remotely so we can afford to live in Southeast Asia and not dip into our savings. So once again, guys, I'll catch you in the next video.